Very happy you're here today for the third installment of the TOK presentations, grade 12. A little bit about, so I see some new faces here. I just want to apprise you of what the TOK presentations are. Basically, they're the internal assessment requirement by IB for the course. Along with the essay, which will come later. Basically, the TOK presentation entails taking a real-life situation. It could be something found in the news, like an event, or maybe a regular occurrence, like the presidential elections. In any case, it's a real-life situation. And what they do is they ask a knowledge question about it. So a knowledge question is kind of like a question that kind of digs deeper than the surface. So if we're talking the presidential elections, we're not really talking about my guy's right, your guy's wrong, but more like how do we know that maybe my guy is right or your guy is wrong, or how are we influenced by the media? Might be a good knowledge question. So we try to avoid polemics. It's kind of a there's controversy in it in the presentation, but we're avoiding polemics. But we're looking at how do we know what we know by asking this knowledge question. From there, students will elaborate on their knowledge question. They will look at it from different perspectives in the context of the real-life situation. And then they go back to the real-life situation that they started with, hopefully with new insight, and maybe relate it to other similar real-life situations. Okay, so that's the flow of it. That's what to expect. Without further ado, I'll give you our first presenter, Shen.
Hello everyone. Today I'm the first presenter, so I have a little bit nervous. So my topic of TOK presentation is beliefs and behavior, and my mission for grade 12. Okay. My real life situation is taken from the UNBC News. It's one of the mass media in the United States. It's about the thousands across the US join Keep Families Together march to protest the family separation. So in 2018, after zero tolerance policy published from President Trump to the illegal immigrants from the borders of Mexico and the United States, 2,000 children had been separated from their parents because their parents are illegal immigrants. So for over 1 month without staying with their guardians. So later time, because of this situation, thousands of Americans start to protest in front of White House to stop the family separation. So, according to my real life situation, it includes the situation that the beliefs affect the behaviors. What is the beliefs? The belief is President Trump is considered as a nationalist. So he thinks that the outsiders, like the foreigners, are having the equal welfare as a local citizen. So after he elected as the president of the United States, he set up several immigration policies for limiting the foreign business and the illegal immigrants to secure the Americans, kind of Native Americans' civil rights. And the zero tolerance policy is to limit and punish the illegal immigrants from people who come from the border of Mexico to the United States. and there caused 2,300 children to be separated from their parents. So thousands of Americans think that children has been separated from the parents, so they are being angry and just perform behaviors that thousands of Americans protest. So in front of the White House. In this case, I decided to try to form a question to investigate to what extent can a belief affect people's behavior. This is my knowledge question. It's the same as I said. And it can also be interpreted as to what extent does belief alter people's original behavior. I think the behavior can be say people always have a behavior, but in my knowledge question is how can the leader's belief affect their original behavior? So how they change their behavior patterns. So before I get into a deeper analysis, we have to know two terminologies of my knowledge question. First, the belief. Belief is something that is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion from a person. The behavior is the way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially toward others. And there is other TOK terminologies that we also have to know before we get into the analysis. Sense perception, and also rationalism. And the rationalism states that knowledge comes only from or primarily from the sensory experience, which is also the sense as the sense perception. And the empiricism states that knowledge comes from the reason instead of religious belief or emotional response, which is kind of against the rationalism. And also we have to know the personal knowledge and the shared knowledge. So get to the first claim. My first claim is leaders' belief affect people's behavior by sense perception. I'll apply to the theory of empiricism versus the rationalism. This is kind of the process, and we get it together. So first, leaders form the beliefs, and then they go through the medium. The medium can be mass media. It's like kind of a method that can just spread the leader's belief to the people. And because of it, the sense perception will evolve through the medium transferring to people. Like people can get what they see, what they hear just from senses. And they will form and change their acting or behavior. So we can use the example of how Steve Jobs transformed Apple. So this is the time, I give some background information. This is the time while Steve Jobs just published the first iPhone. So according to the Guy Kowalski, who is worked as the Apple marketing department in 1890s with Steve Jobs, he said that Steve Jobs is a perfectionism. So Steve Jobs formed a belief that he believed everything have to be perfect. So when he communicate with the employees by face-to-face, so this is the state of medium. So the guy Kowalski can, the sense perception is involved. What he see and understand his belief by hearing and looking by his sense. And it will affect like acting seriously to the job. So this is the process that goes through. Just like the same as my first point. So it will lead to the increase the efficiency developed for new iPhone. And also, let us apply to the empiricism I just mentioned before. The empiricism means that the knowledge you gain from is from your sense. And we also use the example from the same example, but we apply to different theories of rationalism. The process was slightly changed if we assume that. So if rationalism believes that they have conduct themselves to based on reason. So while they get the leader's belief from a sense perception, they will choose to evaluate. So instead of really acting seriously to job like forming a very direct behavior, they will not and affect partially by not showing a very direct behavior, because they are going to have another new process of thinking rationally, like thinking from reasons and analyzing from themselves. So my second claim is that leaders' beliefs affect people's behavior, while personal knowledge became shared knowledge. So personal knowledge, for someone who didn't know about TOK, personal knowledge is the knowledge that is from individuals. So like I know, like from you know something. But the shared knowledge is the knowledge that's shared between a group of people or the community. Like, for example, everyone knows chemistry is a science. This is kind of a shared knowledge. So we have to use a transformational machine. It looks like a function machine we learned in the math class. So when we put our latest belief, which is what he or she knows, so which is personal knowledge, and when we input into the transformational machine, and it successfully exchanged into a shared knowledge, and the leader's belief can affect the people's behavior. We can give some example in more details. When I use the Napoleon Code, I think learning the history, everyone know about the Napoleon Code. So the Napoleon had applied his own knowledge about the laws, rules, and how to rule French. So which is his personal knowledge of what he knows. And we put it into the machines, and it was from the Napoleon Code. The Napoleon Code has been published among all the citizens in French, so people have get to know and exchange into shared knowledge, so like everyone knows. And which will just affect their behaviors by changing people's way of treating the genders, like woman is getting rights to by doing something that is different from before, and also they have their civil rights, so people is treating each other equally. However, the limitations of the second claim is that leaders' belief can't affect the people's behavior if personal knowledge failed to change to the shared knowledge. So if the personal knowledge, like what I know, can change to the shared knowledge, people don't have a chance to get the knowledge. So they are as well. They can't just form and change any behaviors. Okay, my conclusion. Point 1. Summarize to first claim. Sense perception serves as the medium that helps to transfer the leader's belief to the people, which cause their behaviors, like change their behaviors. And the second point of the second claim. Personal knowledge are required to exchange as the shared knowledge in order for people to form behaviors and reactions. However, the extent of the people behavior can completely affected by the leader beliefs. So because of the limitations from the second claims and also from rationalism, so it is concluded to answer my questions, the extent of people behavior of like how of to what extent does the leader's belief affect the people's behavior is that it's determined on the percentage of the effectiveness for a process and knowledge exchanged from the people's perspective. The process is from my first claim that from sense perception and people's ways of thinking. So, for my original real-life situation, it is a typical example and significantly being affected. So, when we put it in input into our first claim, Trump believed in that he is a nationalist. He believed he said that make the American great again. I think he had mentioned a lot in the election. And he performed a policy of liberal tolerance, which caused issues like family separation. And it has been shaped by mass media. So people have get senses by the media, which is the mass media in this real life situation. And for a second claim, also as well, the leader's belief is about the nationalism, and he announced the policy before it is his personal knowledge about liberal tolerance. And then it has been known by people, so people are getting to become it's successfully exchanged into a shared knowledge, and what has performed the behavior of the practices, which is changing their behaviors. So this is another situation in long time ago, which is about which is over related to the era of knowledge of religious knowledge system. Galileo was accused of being heretic because of heliocentric theories. So for someone who don't know, heliocentric theories is that Galileo believed that heliocentric believed that Earth is not the sun is not the center of the universe. But during that time, the Catholic Church, they have believed that heliocentric, that sun is in the center of the universe, and they believe Earth is in the center of the universe, that Earth is the supreme status. And put into my first claim about sense perception, Catholic leaders believe in geocentric theories, and they spread to people. Like people hear and people look and people know about like the process of sense perception, and so they believe in theories and start to accuse the contradictory theories because they perform different kind of behaviors. And for the second claim, the exchange of knowledge. So the Catholic leaders believe the same as that. People believe in theories, so the leaders believe, which is the personal knowledge, and people believe in the theory, which is exchanged into the shared knowledge. So they perform different behaviors, support the theories, and reject all the explanations. They just accuse the Galileo. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Open the floor to questions. Anybody has any questions?
Sure. So, Sean, you talked a lot about, right, your real life situation was about protests against Trump's policy, and then you give a lot of examples of for example, Apple and the Napoleonic Code of people adhering to the leader's belief. So, in your mind, let's say the individual or the group in question is apathetic towards the initial change or the initial belief. What do you think is the most important factor that would determine whether they act in line with the leader's beliefs or against the leader's beliefs?
So basically, this my knowledge question for the behavior. It's about like no matter what is negative behavior or the positive behaviors. It is only like how individuals, specific to leaders, his belief, her belief can affect and change our original behavior. Like, for example, like teacher. A teacher is kind of a leader, and he maybe he provide a kind of belief, and we have react different from our normal reacting. So it will just like fit to this like my core mind, that's how to answer my knowledge question, and it is also the main focus for a whole analysis. Like no matter the negative behavior or positive behavior, if it just change the original, then it can be. Is there a question?
Sort of. I just want to know, so is there a way of knowing, so for example, does the level of faith or belief that the person has, could that affect it one way or another? I know your knowledge question was more about the change of behavior in general, but do you have any insights you'd like to share about why it might move one way or the other?
Because everyone has the different minds and different ideologies. So definitely when a new ideology come to you, you will really do some reactions, or you can choose to ignore, like you just don't care about it, or you will just form the behavior for reacting and response to the different ideology. It's kind of like adapt to a new things. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, is that can I interpret that in your presentation you kind of make the equal sign between the personal knowledge and the leader's belief? Okay.
Yeah, it is because leaders are in this situation. I'm assuming that leaders in individuals. So individual is definitely just personal. So it's like personal to the people, to the public. So this is what I would say.
I think we still have some questions. So,
Okay.
anything else? All right. Thank you, Shen.
So, good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the relationship between religion and moral belief. So for my real life situations, I came up with the real life situation about William MacArthur. He was practicing Jehovah's Witness, and what was the problem is that Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in blood transfusions because the Bible prohibits blood transfusions. However, doctors believe MacArthur would die without transfusions, but MacArthur still refused to receive transfusion because it's against the Bible. MacArthur had to be resuscitated twice using CPR after heart attacks, and doctor criticized that without the transfusions, further CPR would be medically useless. However, still, MacArthur refused to sign a do not resuscitate, which means DNR order, hoping to live as long as possible. But the doctors strongly claimed that CPR would not have help and it should not be carried out. And after I look up the real life situations, I came up with the questions such as, what is the relationship between the religion and morality? And to what extent should we respect for others' religious belief? And also, after I look up the real life situations, I have a thought like, I think MacArthur's religious belief seems to be against the morality because there will be lots of patients who need urgent care or surgery from doctors. However, as MacArthur refused to sign a Vienna order, the doctor has to waste the time on CPR while other urgent patients are waiting for help. Also, the doctor has to keep spending extra medical resources, although those are medically useless without blood transfusions. And as a result, I came up with the final knowledge questions, which is, to what extent does religion shape moral belief? And I chose AOKs, which are ethics, religious knowledge systems, and WKs, which are faith, intuitions, and reasons. According to the dictionary.com, it defines the religions as a specific fundamental set of beliefs and practices generally agreed upon by a number of persons or sects. And I came up with the definitions of moral belief, which is moral belief refers to a belief in an idea or object that one considers morally right. So and I think it is debatable to say that MacArthur's religious belief, which is Jehovah's Witness, shaped his moral belief because I think it is debatable to call it as moral belief according to definitions. And there's difference exists between what we call religious belief and moral belief, so that by answering the knowledge questions, we can know that does the Jehovah's Witness only refers to the religious belief, or does it further shape moral belief as well? So for my first claim, I related to the moral relativisms, and WK, which is intuitions, and AOK, which is religious knowledge systems. So what does moral relativism mean? Moral relativism is the belief that there are no universal values, but that our values are determined by the society in which we grew up. And moral values are simply customs or conventions that vary from culture to culture. Moral relativists think that we will find that they have different morals if we look at different cultures or different periods in history. Therefore, it makes sense to say that good refers to things that a particular group or people agree on, and they believe that relativism respects the diversity of human societies. So I came up with examples, which is different belief between Christians and Buddhism in the West and East. So in the West, for Christians, it is not okay to be drunken in anywhere. However, in East, for Buddhism, it is okay to be drunken in private place, but not allowed in public place. Also, the ethical ideals of one religion might seem immoral to members of another religion. For instance, in the 19th century, Mormons consider polygamy a moral obligation, while Catholics consider it as a mortal sin. The examples reveals that religious morality can and does change with the decline and flow of surrounding cultures. And I relate it to the ways of knowledge, which is intuitions, because moral relativism is counterintuitive, as it forced to abandon the idea that some actions are just plain wrong. So for the counter-arguments against the moral relativisms, I came up with moral absolutisms for my counterclaim. And moral absolutisms in that there are some universal rules that apply to everyone. Also, they argues that there are some moral rules that always have to be always true. Also, moral absolutism thinks that immoral acts, which means the acts that break moral rules, are wrong regardless of the situations or the result of those acts. Which means moral absolutism have universal view of humanity. So I came up with the examples, which is the ontologies from Kant. And according to the ontology, the rightness or wrongness of duty of actions does not depend on consequences, but whether actions fulfill our duty. Kant believed that there was a supreme principle of morality, and he called it as the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative decides what our moral duties are, and it commands unconditionally. Therefore, you cannot withdraw from it or argue that it does not apply to you. Kant's categorical imperative emphasizes on reasoning and fairness, and it attempts to be objective. Also, it attaches great importance to right motive rather than consequences of actions. It claims that to be truly moral, action should be motivated by reasons rather than feeling, because feeling is too unreliable to justify our values, so it is not solid foundations. It also claims that action has more value only if we act out of a sense of duty. Kant's categorical imperative generally consistent with intuitions, and it combats selfishness. And for another example, I came up with Muslims. Today, Muslims practicing Sharia law, seeing nothing wrong with cutting the hands of people who refuse to accept their traditions. However, in the point of view of deontologies, the deontologists might see this behavior as immoral, as against the human rights. For my second claim, I came up with religious absolutism. And what does religious absolutism is that they believe what they think, and their own religious belief is always true regardless of any circumstances or any acceptance. So I came up with ways of knowledge, which is faith, and areas of knowledge, which are ethics and religious knowledge systems. And I came up with examples about FGM. FGM literally refers to female genital mutilations, and it happens in lots of religions and lots of countries such as South Sudan or Egypt. And many Egyptians believe that girls or women must cut their genitals at an early age in order to be clean, pure, and feminine. And many religious leaders implicitly or actively support the customs, and because the belief is too strong that even some girls and young women believe the validity of the customs. For my second counterclaim, I think the religious people do not behave more morally than atheists, and I came up with ways of knowledge which are faith and reasons, and areas of knowledge which are ethics and religious knowledge systems. And for my example, I came up with good Samaritan's study. Nowadays, it is true that the world's major religions are concerned with moral behavior. Therefore, many of them might think that religious commitment is a sign of virtue, or even that morality cannot exist without religions. And I found one of the real examples, which is when researchers ask people to report on their behaviors and attitudes. Religious individuals argue that they're more altruistic, compassionate, honest, civic, and charitable than non-religious people. However, the differences between religious people and non-religious people are nowhere to be found in actual behavior. Researchers have now looked at multiple aspects of moral behavior, from charitable donations and cheating exams to helping strangers in need and cooperating with anonymous others. In a classical experiment known as the Good Submersion study, researchers observed who would stop to help an injured person lying on the street. They found that religion played no role in helping behavior. This finding has now been confirmed in numerous laboratory and field studies. Overall, the results are clear. No matter how we define morality, religious people do not behave more morally than atheists, although they often say say that they do, but actually it's not. So when I link back to the real life situations, if we take occasions positions, we will have to respect the wishes of the patients and continue CPR even though MacArthur refused to sign the DPR order. DNR order. However, if we decide to take utilitarianism approach, then we would have to weigh the harms against the benefits. And we have to ask if the benefits of CPR really outweigh the harms for Mr. MacArthur. In conclusions, I think moral absolutisms, moral relativisms, and religious absolutisms answer the questions to what extent religions shape moral belief. They would answer religions can shape moral belief because they believe that there are no universal rules that all of the religious individuals have to be followed. So we have to respect all of the different religious belief from other religions. So they would think that religions can shape the moral belief. However, moral absolutisms answer the questions that religions cannot shape the moral belief, as they believe that there's universal rules that regardless of your religion, such as even though you're Christians, Buddhism, etc., you have to be followed. There are some moral rules, universal moral rules that everyone has to follow, so that they would claim that religions cannot shape moral belief. And this is the end of my presentation, and thank you.
Questions? Comments? Alright, start. If you guys think of anything, great. But I have a question. Do you think that people of the same religion, whatever religion it is, can have different moral beliefs?
Or even though they're in the same religion? I would say yes, it is possible to have different moral belief even though you're in the same religions. Because I think to shape the moral belief, it's not only depends on your religious belief. I think different factors such as your cultural background and your cultural backgrounds would also affect them to shape their religious belief. So that I think maybe the Christians in West or Christian in East, they might have different perspectives on what they call religious belief. So yes, I think it's possible to have a different religious belief, even though you're in the same religions.
So how, in the context of your real life situation, what would the patient, Jehovah's Witness patient, be in the case if another Jehovah's Witness, for instance, said, well, I'm Jehovah's Witness too, and I'll sign the DNR order. Maybe I won't get a blood transfusion, but I'll sign the DNR, do not resuscitate order. How can you weigh both claims in light of the question you asked, the knowledge question you asked? In other words, is there a right or wrong, and how do we determine that?
I think there are two different perspectives to answer that question. I think in perspective of utilitarianism, I think it's definitely wrong to say that, like in the case of MacArthur, even though he didn't refused to sign up the DNR order and blood transfusions, but there might be lots of urgent patients that needs urgent help and surgery from the doctors. So like it depends on, are we going to choose those patients such as like MacArthur who believe the Jehovah's Witness and refuse to sign the DNR order, or should we go for the rest of the urgent patients who needs urgent help? So I think in point of view of utilitarianism, it seems to be wrong to follow the patients, like listen to the wishes such as MacArthur's, those patients, because there are so many people that are waiting for doctors' urgent help. But those patients such as like MacArthur can make the rest of them to be suffered while doctor is wasting the time and resources to save MacArthur, which is useless without blood transfusions. However, I think in perspective of deontology, they might say, even though it's useless if MacArthur refused to sign a DNR order, but MacArthur is also one of the human beings, so we cannot just leave him and wait for end of the life. We can still do something to save him, even though he refused to sign up the DNR order. So I think there are two perspectives to answer the question: is that a right or wrong?
And I think that kind of ties in with another's on the value of another human being. So yes, the utilitarian approach, such and such person is younger, maybe, and they're in this field, engineering or whatever, that is valuable, and this person's at the end of their life. Should we be weighing that? Should we be considering that? Maybe that's another topic, but that's the utilitarian approach. So on the one hand we say everybody's equal, right? And then on the other hand we say, well, you've lived a good life, right? This person is young and maybe, I shouldn't say right, but has more to contribute to society. Should we be weighing that? That's another question, right? All right. Last call. Any questions? Comments?
Sure, yeah, I have a quick question for you. So, You talked about your RLS with the relationship between moral relativism and utilitarianism, and Mr. Richards' question kind of touched a little bit on what I wanted to ask you. Is there a point where that balance between faith and reason turns onto the faith side? So let's say the hospital was empty, and it was only this individual, so there's no draw on resources for that doctor to go help someone else. Or you had an automatic defibrillator, so the doctor didn't have to stay and continue CPR. It would automatically try to shock the patient back into asystole automatically. Right? Is there a point where we can almost ignore moral relativism and prioritize utilitarianism, but in favor of that person who is Jehovah's Witness, or in favor of that person's religious belief? Would there be, or should utilitarianism, in your opinion, always take priority, and in that case it's not even worth it, even though there's no one else in the hospital, even though the defibrillator is automatic?
I would say if there's no one except the patient who believes the Jehovah's Witness and refuse to sign the DNA order, and if there's only one person who have Jehovah's Witness, I do think you can still try CPR, even though he refused to sign the DNA order, because he's one of the human beings, so we cannot just leave him. But I would say if there are lots of like urgent patients who need immediate surgery, I think we have to go for the utilitarianism's point of view, because actually we cannot choose only one individual instead of maybe 100 or like 150 people who are waiting for the surgery.
So in your opinion then, does the decision become less immoral if there are fewer people else aside from that individual suffering, or is it the same level of morality regardless of the situation outside of that individual and their doctor?
I would say if there's only one individual who believes Jehovah's Witness, and there are like thousands of people who are waiting for the surgery, if we go for this side, it seems to be immoral, I would say, because I think in this case we cannot like continuously respect one's religious belief while you go against lots of human beings' lives. So I think in that kind of case it seems to be immoral. But if there's no one except MacArthur, it's not seem to be immoral, because he's the only one who's waiting for the surgery, and he's a human being, so we have to save him.
All right. Looks like we're out of time. Thank you for coming. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day.